Yo, name's Rick. Welcome back to the Lyoko something or whatever. Apparently, I'm supposed to actually talk about this like stupid hack cartoon show from France about these kids that go into a virtual world because apparently I'm in this episode or something. So I don't know. I guess it's episode 50 Contact or I don't know. I don't know. It's just some kind of stupid shit. Apparently, I'm only supposed to talk about it because I don't know. I'm in this episode for like one scene. Don't even really contribute. I'm just there. It's not even me. It's like some hackney. It's like some hackney jackass that just kind of looks like me and for some reason has a German accent. I don't know. Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. I had to do that, but yeah. Today we're gonna be discussing episode 50 of Lyoko Contact. So, but yeah, I guess the only reason I just did that is because the teacher that looks like Rick Sanchez is in this episode, but yeah, I think this episode was aired out of order because let me just get into it. In the beginning, as the premise for this episode is that the group is contacted by some strange by something. What happens is that during a showing of a short film that Odd made, wherein he makes Sissy a monster, Sissy, while berating Odd for it, gets possessed. In the beginning, it looks like it's Xana that's doing the possession because we see the black smoke go into her, but instead of going straight for Aelita, Sissy instead begins speaking in a strange. She begins kind of speaking backwards, like she can't speak English, but it's obvious. It's obvious, and it's obvious at the same time that it's not her because she still has that metallic twang that those possessed by Xana have when they talk, and she, like I said, she's not speaking English. As such, however, she goes right to and when she talks, she goes straight to Jeremy. Of course, everyone there thinks that something's wrong with her, so the principal immediately takes her to the infirmary while all the kids are just asked to go to their rooms. At first, the group thinks that this possibly is Xana, but there's no towers activated, so they just kind of brush it off. Now, personally, I would think that this is apparently a problem that they should probably still look into because it's clearly some otherworldly force that possessed Sissy, but whatever. But apparently, what finally pushes them to actually go investigate is when Sissy breaks into Jeremy's room that night and still tries to talk to him. But when it's clear that Jeremy can't understand her, she instead begins writing something down on a piece of paper. Which, while the principal does come and bring her, while Jim comes and gets her out of there to send her back to the infirmary, Jeremy sees that it's some strange code that he quickly translates on the computer, and it turns out that it's a message. A message that says, "I want to make contact with you. I want to help." The group thinks that there's something going on, and they half suspect this, and they kind of half suspect this is a trap, but at the same time, it's a lead that they can go on, so they end up splitting up. Ulrich and Aelita decide to go to Lyoko and see if there are any towers activated and if Xana has done something, while likewise Odd and Yumi are going to go get Sissy so they can further talk to her. However, both groups come into some strange developments. For Odd and Yumi, what happens is that when they go to get Sissy, it turns out she's being transferred to the hospital, so getting her is going to be a little harder. And as for Ulrich and Aelita, while they're traveling through Lyoko, they find what looks like to be an activated tower. Only instead of it being red, it's white. Think of it like when Jeremy activated a tower himself in order to give Odd extra power in the real world. It's kind of like that because whatever it is, because it's clearly active, but it's not Xana's doing. Made even more suspicious by when Ulrich and Aelita go and investigate it, they're being trailed by tanks. That when they lose them, instead of the tanks going after them, they instead go for the tower and then begin attacking it. So clearly, whatever activated that tower is something that Xana doesn't want, which is ultimately confirmed when Xana does activate a tower and possesses one of Sissy's doctors, who proceeds to try and kill Sissy. Thankfully, Yumi and Odd manage to get there in time and save Sissy before the doctor can throttle her, and they manage to get her out of the hospital and bring her to the factory where everything's going down. As such, when on top of that, when Ulrich and Aelita learned that a tower was activated, Aelita immediately just went to where the activated tower was, in this case the ice sector, while Ulrich stayed behind to defend defend off the tanks. Which she does manage to do for the most part, but ultimately they do overpower him and he gets devirtualized. things continue, and as such, on top of that, while Odd and Yumi are able to get Sissy to the factory, the possessed doctor still comes after them. So they immediately bring Sissy down to the control room while Yumi stays behind to make sure the doctor doesn't trail behind them. Sorry, I just drank this multiple times, so some of it's still digesting. So, but as such, when Sissy comes in, instead of actually contacting the group, she immediately goes to the computer and begins typing out more code. And while she's able to get far, unfortunately, it's at that point when Ulrich gets devirtualized, and unfortunately the tank's attacks finally do manage to do what they're supposed to do, as it manages to deactivate the tower, and whatever it was clearly connected to Sissy, as she immediately passes out on the passes out on the console. However, thankfully, despite this, they do manage to deactivate the tower, and make sure that no one dies. And once it's at, and of course everyone involved doesn't have any memory of it because possession. So Sissy is still angry about the movie. I'm assuming they sent the doctor back to the hospital or something. I don't know. But bottom line, while Sissy was interrupted, they still managed to get some valuable information, and they managed to finally decode what she was saying, which Jeremy then shows to the group. And it's then revealed that the entity that was trying to make contact with them and who activated the tower was Franz Hopper. And that's ultimately where the episode ends. And that revelation alone is why I think this episode was supposed to have been aired before last week's episode. Because last week, when the group met Franz Hopper, it was like I actually didn't even realize this when I watched this, and I'm guessing that's because of my experience watching the show as a kid, but the group immediately didn't question that Franz Hopper was tied to Lyoko. I kind of chalked it up to him possibly explaining that he was connected to Lyoko, just like in between that. So I kind of just didn't even notice that. This episode confirms that Franz Hopper is connected to Lyoko, and that actually explains why at the end of last week's episode, Jeremy said the real Franz Hopper is still in Lyoko, because in the last episode, Xana impersonated Franz Hopper to get close to the group and try and trick them so he could get access to Aileda's memory. But the thing is, so I think that I actually think that's true, because throughout this episode alone, with the revelation that Franz Hopper is on Lyoko and that he's there, it makes me think that this episode was supposed to be aired before last week's episode and someone screwed it up. I don't know if it was aired the right way when it was aired in France, or if it got screwed up when it was translated into English, because I remember last week it said episode 49 before the title, and this week it's episode 50. So someone dropped the ball. It could have, I don't know if it was like that in France or if it happened when it was translated into English. I don't know. I don't know. I think someone dropped the ball in that regard. I think this episode. Honestly, I think that something like that would. I think if this episode had aired first, I would have been more forgiving about how pointless everything was in the last episode. Because again, because nothing is really learned in the next episode. It's just Xana taking advantage of a situation. But I'm talking about the Franz Hopper episode from last week. That one, because when you actually watch this episode first, most of the stuff in there makes sense. Them being accepting of Franz Hopper, getting his help with the supercomputer and what they can do with it. About how they know that Franz Hopper has been locked away on Lyoko, or that he's somehow still on Lyoko, or how they're able to figure out that he's the one that created Lyoko, etc., etc. Stuff like that is easier to digest when you actually watch this episode before the Franz Hopper episode. So, yeah, I think someone dropped the ball in that regard. Because it's very clear via plot details that this episode was supposed to be aired before that, and stuff like that kind of just annoys me. It's part of why I watched it's part of why when I did the Phantom Perspectives, I watched the Danny Phantom episodes in their actual order rather than the DVD order, because there were significant plot details that were revealed in certain episodes aired in certain episodes after that were then there were certain plot details that were revealed in episodes later in the DVD collection than in the beginning. It's stuff like that genuinely annoys me. Now I don't mind it as much as if the major plot details are still in the order they're supposed to be. But stuff like these two episodes, like this episode and the Franz Hopper episode from last week, That genuinely annoys me. Why, like, just why wasn't it meant? Why didn't anyone realize that someone dropped the ball in that regard? And again, and it couldn't have just been that someone screwed up the production order, that someone just sent the wrong episode out at the wrong time because someone took the time to type in episode 49 Franz Hopper, episode 50 Contact. Even though it's clear Contact should have been 49 and Franz Hopper should have been 50. And because I feel like that would have actually been enough. I think that would have been enough to act, and it would have elevated, and I think it would have alleviated some of the problems I had with the Franz Hopper episode. When, okay, not all of them, mind you. I still probably would have hated that episode just because of just how nasty the group was acting towards Jeremy. And again, you can jump to defense and say they were angry, but again, they don't forget all the stuff that Jeremy does for them. They forget what kind of a guy Jeremy is, and they just keep pushing it on and almost act like they're better off without him. They don't know what to say for Aelita, and even then, Ulrich's the one pushing it, who's consistently showing he's still an asshole. So I don't know. But then beating a dead horse at this point. This episode, but forgetting that this episode was aired out of order, it's still really good. If this episode had aired where it was supposed to, had aired when it was supposed to, I think it would have done a lot. What it would have done well, because throughout the series, you are still throughout the season, you've been asking questions about Franz Hopper, Aelita, the Hermitage Estate, and how this all connects together. And so this episode is finally laying down that foundation and letting you know that that they're all connected. We know that Franz Hopper is somewhere on Lyoko because he was able to activate a tower and possess Sissy. And he's clearly not malevolent because he is trying to make contact with the group, and while he possesses Sissy to do it, at the same time he's stuck in Lyoko. There is literally no other way he can make contact with them aside from possibly hacking the computer, and considering that Xanatress tried to throttle him when he possessed Sissy, combined with how he smashed the Franz Hopper's diary, it's clear that Xana probably doesn't like Franz Hopper, so it's probably best to keep it on the down low. So I think that makes sense. And the episode, while it doesn't answer a lot of questions, and we still, at the same time, it does raise some more questions, but it does offer more connections, as we see that Franz Hopper is still somehow connected to the supercomputer. And then which, if these episodes had been aired in the right order, we would have possibly gotten answers with the Franz Hopper episode next week, as we learn that he's the one that in that episode that he's the one that created Xana. Like, that episode is the one that actually told us Franz Hopper created Xana. And again, while Xana was the one that provided the information, that part he has no reason to lie about. While Xana would possibly be willing to deceive, why if he has his connection to Franz Hopper, it would actually make sense why he hates him. It's essentially I'm superior to my creator. It's like Ultron in the Marvel universe. He pretty much rebels against his creator because he thinks he's stronger, or he just doesn't, or he hates humanity, and his creator could be perceived as his greatest threat because he's the one that did all that. So so this episode combined with last week's episode, I think would have made a better pair and would have helped make everything move forward. Again, I still probably would have hated the Franz Hopper episode simply because of what happens in it, but I feel like these two episodes would be better these two episodes are better off as a pair, with this episode coming first and the Franz Hopper episode coming second. And it's rather interesting. It's still, like, we see more layers, we see more layers, and while we still don't get a lot of answers, we do get some more interesting questions. How Franz Hopper is connected, which would have been answered in the next episode. We would have learned more things and ultimately learned exactly more. And we would have gotten some more organic development, and ultimately we still would kind of wonder, why is Franz Hopper in the computer? What's he doing in there? Does he know how to help? Can he help them? How can he help them save Aelita? How can they go through with all this? How can we go through all this? Why is he trapped there? Etc. etc. Those are some interesting questions that I feel that as the series goes on would be answered. In fact, again, the reason why Xana is after Franz would have been answered in the Franz Hopper episode, because again, we learned that it was Franz Hopper that created him. So yeah, that's stuff I'll actually genuinely like. And this episode, I feel, is a good enough way to layer those, to just introduce these elements and keep you interested. Bringing Franz Hopper in a mysterious way, introducing him, showing that he's benevolent and wants to help the group, and ultimately showcasing that he is a danger to Xana simply based on Xana's reaction, sticking the tanks on the tower and trying to throttle him. Again, okay, we already knew that Xana was. I mean, we already knew that he was probably a threat, considering that Xana smashed his journal. But you get what I mean. It shows that he's still a threat and needs to be dealt with. But yeah, that stuff is good. And paired with the Franz Hopper episode, while I still don't like that one, I think it would have made everything a lot better and would have probably, and if these episodes had aired in the correct order, it probably would have been more interesting and probably would have created a more compelling narrative and story. So yeah. But on the whole, though, yeah, I do like the episode. I like how it sets everything up. I like how it introduces elements. I just wish that it had aired in the proper order. So yeah, I guess that's really all I have to say. So yeah, thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson. I'll see you next week.